and certainly from the Hunter perspective, the further out we go, and that's why we have a floating project, stronger winds there are as well. And so the resources are there technically, financially also in terms of the economics here, in terms of the regulatory and legal structure. It's an OECD country, we are positioned in that respect. And the skill sets actually, what we've seen, and particularly where we are in the Hunter, is that we've got the legacy, the coal industry as well, and the skills there, which are all transferable. There are the collaboration in terms of the universities as well, and trying to bring it up. So with all of this, we need to be able to look to countries like the UK as well, and really build on what we've been doing there as well in terms of what their projects are, and the investments and the collaboration between governments and industry, I think there.
Yep, thank you. I was about to ask Simon about a different perspective, because we have two offshore wind developers, but we have just got a question from audience, and that lined up really well on our next question, which is on infrastructure development. So to enable offshore wind, I think it is key for us to ensure the infrastructure is there, and port infrastructure, in fact, has been identified as one of the critical elements. So we have one question here that asks that how can we enable offshore wind? Currently, with Port of Hastings being identified. So what are the strategies that you see that can help us to ensure the port infrastructure is ready for offshore wind?
Yeah, well, shall I introduce myself first quickly? So I look after the Ports and Maritime business at WSP, and WSP's been doing work with the Port of Hastings. They're doing the reference design at the moment for that port, and also working with the Victorian government on various other technical offshore wind port related matters for some time. So we're quite well embedded in the thinking. In terms of let's start with perhaps what you were saying before, Erin and Niny. These are investors or developers that are looking to invest, potentially billions of dollars of their own money into power infrastructure in Australia. And the reason why they're doing that is because there are all the ingredients here for a really good business. You've got strong renewable energy, strong wind energy, you've got a transmission network that's there. In Gippsland, you've also got shallow water, so it's quite cheap to build fixed bottom foundations. So all the ingredients there are for a strong business case to get these things in, but they're only going to invest that money if the risk profile is right, and there are a few parts of that which are important, and one of which is the port. So the port is really critical to being able to get the components to Australia. They're often going to be manufactured overseas at the moment, likely because the supply chains are there in Europe or Asia. So they're going to arrive in Australia, they're going to have to arrive at a port, and then the port needs to be quite specialist. It's quite heavy loads, quite specialist vessels that use them, that will then take the components out to be installed offshore and then back again. So the port actually is a really critical part of enabling infrastructure investment for developers like both Niny and Erin sat here.
All right. Now, I think other than port infrastructure, given the remoteness of Australia, I think supply chain is the next thing that we need to consider as key challenges. I think with the current established market and other emerging market in the APEX region, I think what are the most immediate priorities for us to build a robust and fit for purpose offshore wind supply chain in Australia?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's one that comes up all the time. As Simon said, it's a predominantly global supply chain for offshore wind. It's very specialised, and what we then need to do, as Niny was saying, is how do we stand out against the crowd? When I was looking at the statistics of how many auctions were to be run globally in the next 3 years for offshore wind, it amounts to 86 gigawatts. So if Victoria and Australia is looking for 2 gigawatts in that time, what have we got to do to attract that interest? And something Brett said this morning on the first panel in relation to hydrogen, I think also relates to offshore wind actually, which is you need a proof of concept where you can show the supply chain that you're serious. So sometimes when we talk to those global suppliers, they say, well, are you a talking market, or are you going to do it because they have a lot of markets where there's targets, but as the Global Wind Energy Council says, targets are not turbines. And so to get those turbines, you really need to prove that you're serious, get on with the proof of concept. Once you get that first project away, and this is where, you know, Taiwan has been an incredible example, you just see the pace accelerate significantly and the prices come down and the supply chain interest increase. And I think particularly in the environment that we are in, where there's challenges in markets like the US, suppliers, you know, perhaps have capacity, but they want to see those strong signals, whether it be the first project getting away or the ports getting built, and those sorts of things. But, you know, that's the global side. I think we all have a responsibility, and you know, personally, I take the responsibility very seriously when talking about a region like Gippsland and the Latrobe Valley, to unearth as much local content as we can in this country, and we've been doing a significant amount of work to understand what that looks like. I often say the best part of my job is going to places like, you know, Henderson in WA, or touring factory floors in Tomago in the Hunter, or in the Valley looking at some of these secondary steel opportunities. So what's I think been really remarkable also in that sense, you don't hear about it often because it's not super controversial, but it's just the way that developers like ourselves and the renewable industry are working with the coal sector and the oil and gas sector to understand their supply chains. And when their facilities, such as Yallourn, which is coming out in 2028, are no longer available, what is the continuity of that business, and how can offshore wind step in, and how can we as the developer ensure that they're connected to the global supply chain and the tier ones and their requirements, so that we can get going sooner rather than later. So I think there is a lot of heavy lifting and analysis going on in that sense by developers, by government, by others, but really it'll come down to that first project proof of concept, getting on with it, and then we'll see how it rolls out.